From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay.
Joystick on it is just like an Xbox controller.
A robot with a purpose that's protecting people and livestock.
Some farmers are done with harvest in east central Illinois, but did they see the yields USDA forecasted? We'll have the answer ahead in the show.
And finally, the U.S. and China coming together to talk trade.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
We begin with new developments that could bring an end to the trade battle with China. President Trump will meet with China's President Xi Jinping. We told you earlier this week it was a possibility. That meeting scheduled to happen next month at the G20 summit. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow making the announcement.
Oh, you add that to the trade imbalance and the tariffs and the non-tariff barriers. They won't let us own our businesses and they won't give licenses. They've got a lot. Our asks are on the table. I'd love to see them respond. Thus far, they haven't. The two presidents will meet for a bit in Buenos Aires, Argentina at the G20. Other than that, nothing I can say.
The meeting comes as recent tariffs were put on some $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. China has retaliated by putting tariffs on American products. Ag economists say the current trade war means both sides have a lot at stake.
I think that's good news for producers, at least within the ag sector and really industries across the country. I think it's good news to have people come together and talk about these issues. The problem with some of conflict resolution is when people aren't talking, we don't get very far. So I think this is welcoming news that they're talking. We don't know a lot of the details and we don't really know what they're going to discuss or what's even really going to be considered a success coming out of this meeting.
Brown says the longer the conflict lasts, the greater the chance global trade flows will be impacted long term. The Dow taking a drop on Tuesday, partially led by Caterpillar's earnings report. The company reporting its best ever third quarter, but it warned about rising costs due to higher steel prices and those U.S. tariffs. And that caused shares to fall more than 8% on Tuesday. Caterpillar estimates the impact of tariffs to be about $40 million in the third quarter, but the company said third quarter sales and revenues were up 18%.
The I-80 Harvest Tour is brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
USDA's crop progress report shows Illinois farmers are moving along when it comes to harvest ahead of the 5-year average with both corn and soybean progress, and the department is forecasting the highest corn and soybean yields in the Corn Belt to come from the land of Lincoln. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon talked with farmers in east central Illinois.
Some farmers in east central Illinois are already done with harvest for 2018. The equipment is cleaned up and the corn is in the bin.
Randy Auberly is on the move. Harvest is complete. Now 2019 prepping begins.
Looking at, do we do tillage? Do we do no-till? Do we do strip-till?
At the same time, the Melvin, Illinois farmer is reflecting on his growing season.
We went through a spell this summer of about, I think we were 6 weeks, roughly, give or take, without any rain.
He says the lack of rain trimmed corn yields, but saved him extra cash on drying costs.
It dropped down into the teens very fast. And so, yes, we saved on drying costs, but I know we gave up yield.
However, USDA says farmers in Illinois have it pretty good. The crop production report says the average forecasted corn yield for Illinois is 212 bushels per acre. Auberly says while the crop is bountiful, it's still not as good as last year.
We're probably 10% off of where we've been the last 3 years, but we are still, 20, 30 bushel over APH at this point.
For soybeans, USDA has an average forecasted yield of 66 bushels per acre for the state.
We're well above APH and pretty much on track with where we've been for the last 3 to 5 years. Upper 60s, low 70s seem to be more of a pretty good average for us.
Still, Auberly says he's happy overall.
We're over-equipped for the acres that we have, but this year it really worked out, I think, in our favor.
Reporting in Melvin, Illinois, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. A Northern California judge has upheld a jury's verdict, finding that the weed killer Roundup caused a groundskeeper's cancer, but she slashed his $287 million award to $78 million. The jury's August verdict included $255 million in punitive damages. The judge said that was too high. Jurors found then Monsanto's popular Roundup product caused Dwayne Johnson's lymphoma. Bayer, which now owns Monsanto, strongly disagrees. It says it plans to appeal the ruling. Japan dealing with an unusual case of African swine fever. Officials saying it was carried into the country by a foreigner coming from Beijing who had a bag of packed pork sausage. Reuters says genetic testing detected the disease in samples of the product. China has reported more than 40 separate outbreaks of the disease in 11 provinces and cities since August. More than 200,000 animals have had to be killed. Now this is making waves. Animal activist group PETA reviving an old post online saying on its website, quote, "Cow's milk is the perfect drink for supremacists." The group claiming, quote, "dairy milk has long been embraced as a symbol of white supremacy," end quote. Now the organization goes on to say the dairy industry inflicts extreme violence on living beings. This obviously leading to all kinds of comments being made on social media. We reached out to the Dairy Management Incorporated, which released the following statement, quote, "As a community, we take pride in responsibility producing nutritious and delicious dairy products with a variety of versatile options, cheese, yogurt, lactose-free, or flavored milk. There's something for everyone. Our belief is that food should bring people together versus being used to create division. Anything that does the contrary does not align with who we are or the great taste dairy food that we're proud to produce and that many people enjoy every day," end quote. Despite Hurricane Michael causing devastation, there's still a crop to pull in Georgia. More now from meteorologist Cindy Clausen. Good morning, Cindy.
Thanks, Clinton. Well, the people in Georgia are not giving up on the harvest following Hurricane Michael. This photo shared with us by Jimmy Webb in Leary, Georgia. Now, Jimmy said he was glad to see the peanut combines running again. He says it's finally starting to smell like harvest. And he says while it's going to be a rough ride, the people of Georgia will persevere. Let's take a look at the wind forecast as we head through the day today, and it's going to be kind of the main areas, the northern plains, western Texas into the Four Corners region, also into the northeast as well. And as we put this into motion, you can see that starting to get into the upper Midwest where we see those winds starting to kick up a little bit more. Overnight, we see a lot of areas dying down. We keep those winds in the northern plains and parts of the upper Midwest. And heading through the day on Thursday, we start to pick up some more winds as you get into, again, the western parts of the northern plains, up into Montana, even over into the western parts of Canada. The northeast, far northeast New England, going to stay just a bit on the windy side, and we'll see some winds along the Gulf Coast as well. I'll have your national forecast coming up, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
The AgDay team heading to the National FFA Convention and Expo today. I'll be there checking out this year's convention in Indianapolis. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon has a special one-on-one with the outgoing president who is continuing to make history. Look for a special edition of AgDay TV from the National FFA Convention tomorrow morning. Still ahead, protecting people and animals with a little help from a robot. How this simple-looking contraption is really making a difference in the country.
Join Andrew McCrae for Farming the Countryside, a farmer-focused podcast that is all about production agriculture. Farming the Countryside is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and is brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, the world's largest provider of crop inputs and services.
In agribusiness, a turbulent day in markets with crude oil seeing a big drop during Tuesday's trade. Let's get details on the commodities now from our friends on the floor in the CME in Chicago.
A little bit of a positive tone going into the close here today. We started off with a very quiet day, really tight ranges in corn, wheat, and soybeans, and a little bit of a heavy tone coming out of the night session. But as the day's gone on, we found a little bit of strength led by corn. Corn got back over the 370 level once again, which had been a very tough nut to crack on the first wave up. And actually back above the 100-day moving average at 371. As far as soybeans are concerned, we got a little bit more work to do on this bounce before the chart really takes a turn. We did break out of to the downside of the upward trending channel, but we're trying to get back in here right now. Either way, fairly positive turnaround in soybeans after being down in the night session a fair amount. Once again, this is Ted Seifried from the CME floor.
The president planning to meet his counterpart from China next month, but if there isn't a resolution, What does that mean for American farmers? Tyne Morgan asks a question in today's analysis from the road.
Here now with Wally Tyner of Purdue University. Wally, when you look at the trade tensions with China, how long can agriculture afford for this dispute to go on?
Not too long. If Brazil and other exporters that compete with us in the world market, if they're able to expand their acreage, if this goes on long enough that they have an incentive to expand their acreage, we will not likely get that acreage back. They're low-cost producers. They can compete with us in the world market, and if the prices stay for them high enough, long enough, then it could be a real problem for us.
But how many acres are you talking? How many acres are at stake at this point, Wally?
I'd say about 9 million acres. It's not a small number.
9 million acres that we could lose to Brazil and never get back?
That's right.
So how long do you think is at risk here? Like, are you talking 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? How long can these trade tensions with China go on before we do lose those acres?
That we could lose them in as little as 2 or 3 years. So there's a lot at stake in these negotiations coming up in November. We need to get moving on that. We need to get back to markets and selling to markets, and so they're really important.
It's so hard to forecast, though, how long these trade negotiations are going to take. For example, when you look at the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, Wally, it took an entire year for us to get that deal. And still, 2 days before the deal came out, we thought there was no deal with Canada. Yeah. So, I mean, how hard is it to track this when you don't know where the outcome's going to be?
This is going to be really hard because there's a lot at stake, both for China and for the U.S. And finding some common ground is not going to be easy. So people ask me, what's going to happen? I have no idea, because there's so much built-in interest at stake for both sides.
And more than just trade.
Oh yeah, intellectual property rights. For this administration, the balance of trade is considered to be an issue. So there's just a lot at stake. China has their 2025 plan.
Right. All right. Wally, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll take a quick break and then we'll have much more right here on Ag Day.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Here, meteorologist Cindy Clausen, as we look at the root zone moisture map. And Cindy, we saw this last week. Lots of blue on this map. Not as much of the yellow and red dry spots around the country.
Exactly. We've seen a lot of moisture in a lot of places over the past few weeks, and we're really seeing that reflected on the root zone moisture map. But here's the difference. While we really don't see a lot of change, what we are seeing is just everybody pretty much across the board is just slightly drier. So while there's still a lot of blue in the nation's midsection, there's just slightly less blue on there. And that goes for everybody around the country, just slightly drier, not a big change. All right, let's take a look and see who's going to maybe see some more wetness over the next 24 hours. We're going to be seeing remnants of Willa moving into the Four Corners region, and we're going to see some of that. We've got an upper level trough moving through the southwest as well. That's kind of helping with things as well. So it's going to be another wet day for much of Texas, not something that folks there want to see. High pressure keeping much of the central and eastern corn belt on the dry side, so we'll be getting in the fields a little bit more today. And then as we look at the southeast, we've got a low pressure system, western Gulf Coast states. We're going to see some moisture really streaming up into the central and western Gulf Coast states with that as well. Couple of systems affecting the northwest. That's going to be increasing the rain, especially as you get towards Washington and over into far western Canada. Here's tomorrow morning. You can see that low pressure system continuing to very slowly inch northward. So Louisiana looking like a wet day for you as we head through the day tomorrow. That's all heading off to the northeast. So we're going to start to see that affecting the central and eventually the eastern Gulf Coast states as well. We'll start to pick up a little moisture in parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest as well. Here's a look at precipitation over the past 24 hours. It really has been mainly in the southwestern parts of the country, especially over towards western Texas and New Mexico. That's been the real focus. And as you add on the next 24 hours, boy, you can see where that moisture is going. It focuses on those Gulf Coast states, especially Texas. Some of these areas have been very wet over the past couple of weeks. Temperatures are still still on the cool side for a lot of areas. We're back into the 60s for parts of the northern high plains. We're seeing some 40s for highs in the Great Lakes. Warmer down along the Gulf Coast states with some 70s there. Overnight hours we go, and we're going to see some 30s dipping down, so some cooler air there. A lot of 40s and 50s across much of the rest of the nation. Tomorrow we're going to be seeing those high temperatures, a lot of 40s and 50s across a good chunk of the United States. Jet stream, little trough there continuing in the northeast. We see that weak ridge kind of moving across the country, but watch what happens. Our model's still showing this, a kind of a big trough over the weekend. We'll have to look to see how stormy weather that gets, but then another trough moving across the nation's midsection as we get into the middle part of next week. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check out the weather where you live. Golden Valley, Arizona, mostly sunny for you today with a high of 79 degrees. Cambridge, Nebraska, cooler with showers and a high of 58. And Clover, South Carolina, sunny and cooler for you with a high of 66 degrees.
Producers in one state getting clever when it comes to selling organic. That story next. Illinois farmers who grow local organic fruits and vegetables are changing their business practices. The Chicago Tribune reporting many small Illinois farmers rely on sales through community-supported agriculture programs. The idea that people pay for a weekly box of vegetables, but farmers say their sales have decreased. That's because they're seeing more competition, including from large grocers offering organic produce. There are also meal kit startups that are gaining in popularity. Now, some farmers are allowing members to select what goes in their boxes for an additional cost in hopes of growing their business. California may be famous for Hollywood, but there is a different part of the state where poverty prevails, like in little farming towns such as Huron. That's halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, nearly 40% of the city's 7,000 residents live below the poverty line. Spanish is the primary language for nearly everyone. Picking or packing crops pays up to $12.50 an hour, but jobs are seasonal and many go for months without work.
We need something that's going to have permanent employment year-round. Every time I speak on a panel, and if there's a legislature from the state, you know, I talk about the fact that the Fresno County has 4 of the top 5 poorest cities in the state of California. Why can't we pursue an initiative to bring in manufacturing or assembly center that will employ hundreds of people from all these communities?
Congressional hopefuls in the Central Valley have blamed incumbents for doing little to create higher paying jobs, curb homelessness, or solve disparities in health care. Many in the district can't vote because they're in the country illegally, or don't vote because they're more concerned about putting food on the table. All right, ahead, new technology that could save lives or at least a few sore feet, all while keeping animals safe. You have to check out this cattle rustling robot in the country.
In the country, brought to you by Kubota. Learn more about Kubota SSV Series skid steers at Kubota.com or demo one at your local Kubota dealer today.
We have something pretty incredible to show you this morning, a new way to rustle cattle that keeps drivers safe. It's a robot, 2 years in the making. A lot of people, including Temple Grandin, were involved in making it happen.
We're in Schuyler, Nebraska. We are a processing facility. We will process cattle, 5,400 head a day.
You're hurting a live animal. Our biggest deal is safety out here.
I mean, you're talking 1,500 to 1,800 pounds.
These are very large animals, and it's something that causes concern because there is no way of knowing what the animal is going to do.
One of our vendors sent me a link to a video, and probably within 10 seconds of watching the video, I just immediately knew we could move cattle with that kind of robot.
Didn't know what it looked like, I didn't know the functionality of it, so it was just a bunch of unknowns.
It's something that you don't think would work right away.
First one we tried was made out of plastic, you know, and it got kicked once and the pieces flew. We've definitely beefed it up. What we did then is we looked at, okay, how do we move cattle today? Well, we move them with flags. They were kind of redesigned the whips that we had on it with the trash bags that we use. Our employees, they can talk, they can whistle. So we needed sound.
Come on, let's move it. Come on, hey, hey.
You work with this thing for 2 weeks and you're just You're amazed on what it can do already.
Before lunch break, we already had 3 employees running the robot and doing a very fine job of running it.
Joystick on it is just like an Xbox controller, so pretty easy.
Employees appreciate the fact that it's keeping them safe.
Hey, it's another team member. It makes them feel a lot safer, and it actually is pretty good assistant.
If something does occur, it's a machine that breaks and not a human getting hurt.
Run over the robot. That's fine. We can build it, refix it, we can buy a new one. But, you know, keeping our employees safe, that was the #1 driver for me.
Thanks to Cargill for sharing that video. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.